Good morning, everyone. This is Pauline Chung from the San Mateo Area Chamber of Commerce. I wanted to welcome you all to Business Essentials this morning. Our guest speaker is Mitch Williams. He's the owner and CEO of Home Helpers of San Mateo County, but he's also a climate reality leader. So he's going to share about the Climate Reality Project with us today. I'm going to turn it over to Mitch. Ask that you stay muted. Please type your questions in the chat box and we will address your questions towards the end. Thank you so much.
So I know, thanks an awful lot, Pauline. I know most of the folks on the call, so welcome. We're going to try and, I'm going to go through these quite quickly. The context of this, well, first, even though you guys know me, our business is in home care for seniors. So we take care of America's greatest generation who are now more vulnerable than ever given this whole COVID thing. So that's our primary business. We're in San Mateo County. We've been open for 8 years and my wife and I run it together. So you might be wondering, well, what's the connection between home care and climate challenges, climate issues? There isn't one really. It just happens to be a subject that I have become interested in the last probably decade. And there's a gentleman in my San Mateo Rotary who went through this training about 6 or 7 years ago. And so when he told me that they were holding it again virtually in July, I said, sure, sign me up. So this is Al Gore's Climate Reality Project that goes back about 20 years. So the training went over 9 days. There were 10,000 people on these calls. Al Gore himself actually conducted about 5 hours worth of the training. And so what the presentation that I'm going to run through quickly here is a condensed version of his. So his full presentation is 600 slides, which he did over a 5-day period. So this is actually called the Truth in 10, and this one's 60 slides, and I've cut it down to about, I don't know, 45 or 50. So I go fast. If anybody wants a deeper dive on this, then just let me know and I can take you through a deeper dive. So I'm going to launch in, but this is one of the most iconic photos ever taken. It was the last Apollo space mission in 1972. And it kind of basically says that we're all in this together as this is our Earth to kind of take care of. And I think this was one of the first pictures ever of the full southern solar ice cap. So they're kind of the process goes through essentially these 3 questions. So do we have an issue? Forget about who caused it. Do we have an issue? And can we do anything about it? And then the last question, of course, is will we? So that's kind of the context. So the first is, do we have an issue? So this is a little science 101, but essentially that's the Earth's atmosphere. And what happens is radiation comes from the sun and the atmosphere is basically preventing us, the Earth, from burning up. So the atmosphere is protecting us. But a lot of some of the radiation gets through the atmosphere and it warms up the Earth. Some of the energy that comes in is then radiated back into space in the form of infrared rays. And some of this stuff is trapped. And so when it gets trapped, the consequence of that is Earth starts to warm up. So the emissions are really the culprit here. And so this is kind of what's going on, what's been going on. This date is pre-COVID. There's been a pretty substantial decrease in emissions, 8% total over the last 6 months. But essentially, when you throw 152 million tons of man-made emissions into the atmosphere every 24 hours, it's almost like we're treating the atmosphere like an open sewer. So this is the heart of the problem. And these are your sources of greenhouse gases. This is familiar to all of us. Coal plants are a pretty big culprit. Industrial manufacturing. In the month of February, I believe China's emissions were reduced by something like 250 million, just China, 250 million tons just in the month of February, because essentially their industrial manufacturing shut down. So you can see some of these other sources as well. But by far and away, the biggest source of emissions is the burning of fossil fuels, by far. It's not even close. So it all kind of ties back together to this concept of clogging up the atmosphere. But you can see, and for those of you that were on a couple minutes early, we've all experienced in the last 3 or 4 days really dramatic temperature increases just in the Bay Area. I heard on a call I was on this morning, LA was 121 degrees yesterday. So this isn't like stuff we're making up. This is absolutely happening. 72%, I'd say it's 100% chance. I'm giving some of the temperatures around the country. And then in the last basically 20 years, we've had 19 of the 20 hottest years have been in the last 20 years. And then the last 5 have been the hottest of all time. So June 29th, Miami recorded its hottest week ever. You all heard about the fires in Australia. All of this stuff is interrelated, right? So this is the extreme, severe, and low intensity. January, you know, that's their summer, 111 degrees. 111 degrees again. Temperatures in Europe, 2019 was Europe's hottest ever. Of all places, we all have heard of Siberia as one of the coldest places on the planet. This is the northernmost temperature or area to ever reach 100 degrees. So as I said, it's all interrelated, right? So you have the problem with the atmosphere, and then you also have a problem with the temperature of the ocean is increasing because a lot of that heat ends up in the ocean. So these are worldwide records in terms of ocean temperatures, and you'll see the implication of this in a second. We're going to set a record again. And so as the temperature in the ocean increases, more evaporation occurs into the sky, which causes, you know what? So this is kind of the interrelated, what's called the hydrological cycle. So it's basically evaporation, precipitation into the water, and then evaporation back in again. And so as the temperature increases around in the globe, all 3 of these items are affected by it. So what happens are these huge storms that occur. This is one in a typhoon in the Philippines in May of this year. I was, when Al Gore did this, so there was 3 days of this like doom and gloom stuff, to the point where it's like, wow, this is really depressing. And he kept saying during it, don't worry, we're going to finally get to some good news. So I'll say the same thing to you guys. It's not all doom and gloom. It is in the beginning. But this is a pretty disturbing fact, and that is that the gravest effects of these attacks on the environment affect the poorest of those on the planet. This is a campaign, and calling it ecological devastation is one of the primary evils. So these are participation anomalies. So this is what's called a supercell. So you remember from the hurricane in Houston, what year was that? 2018, I think, when they had something like 5 inches of rainfall in 5 minutes, or not 5 minutes, in an hour. I mean, it was ridiculous. So it's the result of increasing temperatures in the ocean causes this evaporation, which then cause these dramatic torrential rains and hurricanes, tornadoes. And the point of these slides is that this isn't just in the United States, this is all around the world. This is one that was a year ago in New Jersey. And these are the counties that are most vulnerable to disaster, tend to be lower income types of counties. 81% minority. And then of course there's another implication, and that is because of these floods, farmers in the US were unable to plant 20 million acres. So that's going to have a longer term impact. So floods and extreme rainfall events now occur 4 times more than in 1980. So just in a short amount of time. So the evaporation causes these extreme downpours. And then it also has another effect, which is drought. So as it pulls the moisture out of the soil, we experience droughts that are longer and more intense. This is just this year, groundwater in Europe. You can see it's pretty extreme. This is a drought in the Czech Republic. It's the worst in 500 years. And then, of course, we certainly in California are familiar with this. It's happening right now as we speak. So more and more of them and more devastation from them. We all remember this one from last year. This one was started by a piece of PG&E equipment that was 100 years old, which is inexcusable if you think about it. These are the fires in Australia and South America. So it's a global kind of issue. So these are the extreme weather catastrophes, and you can see that they're all up and to the right. This is a glacier, a picture of a glacier in southwest Greenland from 1935. And then a shot in 2013. So of course the melting ice causes increases in the oceans and seas, which causes other kinds of problems. You can see a dramatic decrease. This is per year in billion metric tons. So this is an interesting shot. So this is a shot of an octopus in a parking garage in Miami Beach, Florida. There was no rain associated with this event, 0 rain. It was a high tide issue, which directly correlates to the melting ice. So this is from a 2014 roadmap. So there's a myriad of implications in terms of pandemic, and this is, they weren't even thinking about COVID at this point. So it's a medical emergency as well, and we'll get into this. So tropical disease, and this is pre-COVID, right? So this is just all the other types of tropical disease that are increasing. And air pollution is a massive contributor to deaths across the country, across the globe. This is April 2020. So this is a study that basically said in elevated levels of bad air, the COVID increases are 22%. So there's a direct correlation between compromised lungs and COVID. Land-based species in this century, up to 50%. This is my Chamber of Commerce slide. So you can see the cost of carbon has, it's just really across the board. And it's a huge threat beyond the threat that COVID presents. And so the answer is obvious there, right? Now the question is, can we? So this is now we get to the positive stuff, okay? And I am watching the clock. I'm going to try and end so I can answer some questions if anybody has any questions. So in 2000, the projection of wind capacity to generate electricity was 30 gigawatts by 2010. What actually happened? We beat that goal by 22 times. So that's really, really positive and really encouraging. So this is global wind energy capacity. There's actually a couple of places in Texas, because it's very, very windy, where they've got some of these wind generation turbines, and their cost to produce electricity is so inexpensive they can give it away. It's pretty cool. And then solar, of course, we were talking about this earlier. So again, the projection, 1 gigawatt per year by 2010, and here's the actual, 17 times. So again, a real positive. And 121 times in 2019. So these are solar installations in the last 40 years. You can see it's a dramatic uptick. And this is why. It's because the cost to produce has dropped to the point where earlier in the call we were talking about, you can now literally put solar on your house without spending a nickel. And Chile has really been at the forefront of adoption. Wait until you see this slide. Look at that. Isn't that unbelievable? Just because the government said, it makes sense, let's do this. So the good news is that the sun produces in 1 hour, for every hour, enough energy to provide electricity or supply the world's energy needs for an entire year. So that's pretty powerful. That's what solar is all about. And then of course it's all about storage. So the cost of storage is coming down dramatically. And the ability of these basically storage units to store more and more are increasing dramatically. So that's a really nice trend. Most auto manufacturers are moving to electric, and with subsidies and as ranges increase, it becomes almost a no-brainer to own an electric vehicle. So here's your trend on battery and plug-in hybrids. So the answer is we can, right? We can. So you're familiar with the Paris Agreement that was signed in 2015. There is good news on this front as well. So essentially what this was, countries, every major country in the world came together and said, we're going to impose on ourselves restrictions to try and come together on this problem. The good news, and this was probably the greatest thing I learned when I went through this training, is that even though there's been a lot of noise about the US pulling out of this, if there's a change in administration with one little email, we can be back in 30 days. So we're actually not technically out. So this is a chart on stocks. My view is when the financial markets punish a sector, that's when it's kind of over for that sector. So it's been the worst, energy's been the worst, I'm talking coal and oil, the worst performer in the biggest bull market in the last 10 years. So these are some states that have come together and said, okay, we're gonna set some goals and set some standards. So basically it's 55%. These are some global companies that have said it's important to go renewable. So you'll recognize a lot of these brands. And then it's the Greta generation, right? That's making a lot of noise about this subject. This is the generation that really cares about this issue. And they're wondering why it's taken us so long. Why are we dragging our feet? Okay, so I got 5 minutes. If any, do we have any questions in the chat, Pauline?
See, there is nothing in the chat, but
Okay.
feel free to unmute if you have a question for Mitch. Some amazing statistics here.
Yeah, it's really crazy how the information, I'm really impressed by Chile. And I also have to wonder, you know, with, I think that the US, for the longest time, we have always pushed for, you know, coal and gas and all that stuff. And I think that that's probably one of the reasons why that industry or those industries are so resistant to the change, because they're so dependent on the money that comes from those sources.
So that's a very good observation. There's actually some slides in the bigger presentation that talk about that issue. So government subsidies for the last 60 or 70 years have been, and even today, I think the number is globally, the difference between subsidies for fossil fuels, so oil, coal, around the world versus renewables, it's 32 times more money from government subsidies for fossil fuels than for renewables. That's a problem. In the US, it's 24 times.
Yeah.
So,
and it's really interesting because when the conversation comes around solar and they ask for subsidies to go to solar, they say, no, that's unfair. But it really isn't, because the government historically has always put subsidies to different industries. I mean, farming industry is another one where you also see subsidies going there.
that's right.
So it's not like it's never been done. You just have to have the will to do it to the resources that really make the most sense.
That's right. So in the, one of the things they did in this training is they had breakout rooms, right? Because there were 10,000 people. So they would put about 20 of us in breakout rooms, and, you know, over the course of the 9 days, and we talk about different things. And one of the things they tasked us with was come up with some questions to ask the panel of scientists. And so one of the very last things they did was they had this panel talk about some of these questions. And so one of the questions was, what's the single greatest thing an individual can do to have an effect on this issue? And the answer was, use your vote. That was the number one issue, or the number one thing that we can all do, is to, because there's no question that leaders, you know, in the government have an impact on this issue. And the U.S. is really the only country that's politicized this subject. Most countries around the world, it's not a political issue. Most countries around the world realize that this is a problem. We need to do something about it. So, anybody have anything else? Any other questions or anything?
Yeah, so this is Mia. Thank you, Mitch,
Sure.
for taking the time and doing this, and great presentation. Really kind of at awe with it, and I don't think that this is something I'm very connected to. But it's just so disheartening on how this issue isn't talked about more, and there's still this stigma around it when you talk about it. And so I guess more of a comment, but than a question, but it's just, how can we really get more people to hear this? And I understand voting, and even with that can be frustrating at times, because as you were just saying, it is very much a political issue within this country. But I just, you know, it's something you want to shout from the rooftops.
It is. It is. And that's the point of that's what, so these 10,000 people, I can't remember what the number is, but it's a big number of folks that have been through this training. And then, so our mission is to do things like this little group that we have right here, and to do it frequently, because as frustrating as it is, the more noise we make, the more there's a chance that something will actually be done about it. And the fact that we now have two ways to produce energy, solar and wind, that cost less and don't have the disastrous effect on the environment that the other methodologies do, is a huge positive. We just have to drive the adoption.
And I think also, I'm sorry, Mia, and I think also to share your story, Mitch, about solar power and, you know, what the installation to your property is going to be like. Because I think that if you can show people that there are financial smart reasons why you should consider this, I mean, all you have to do is just show them that.
That's right. When it doesn't affect their pocketbook, right? When you don't have to lay out a bunch of money, if you don't anymore, it's literally going to cost, we're going to make money on our, and when I was telling Pauline and Maria this, when the power goes off in October or whenever it goes off, we won't be affected, because we're going to have a 3-day battery backup setup that's included. So it's pretty exciting. I've been talking about it to all my friends and stuff, and so I think we're at the time. So thank you guys for joining. And if any of you want a deeper dive, or you have some sort of gathering of folks and you want me to give this again, I'd be happy to do that.
Yeah, Mitch,
Okay.
thank you so much. And that would be great. I want to take you up on that offer.
Okay, just let me know, Mia. I'll be happy to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.